Welcome to the IGEOS show, where we help grow the passion for an extraordinary workplace. If you're listening to or watching this, we hope to strengthen your passion for a workplace that has the potential not only to have an extraordinary impact on your life, but also on the world. My name is Amit Riker, and my co-hosts are Valerio Pascotto and Timothy Galway. Now to you, Valerio.
Thank you, Amit. What drives our efforts is really a vision and credo to enrich humaneness in the workplace. For that, we interview thought leaders who have been inspired by values of compassion, empathy, and modeling to share their discoveries, challenges, and successes. Really, there's no time like now to change the tide, from hateful divisiveness to seeking similarities, from the myth of the genius to the wisdom of humankind, and from the fears of the primitive brain to the wonder of generosity and warmth.
To support you in this work of creating extraordinary workplaces, we would like to offer you a free worksheet you can download on the 5 disciplines of a high-performance team. Just go to IGEOS.net to download the sheet and learn more about us. And now, on to our guest for today. Welcome, welcome, conscious leaders and teams. We have a special guest with us today. I've got my co-host, Valerio Pascotto as well. And today joining us is Lorna Davis. We're so grateful. We're so excited to have her join us in this conversation today. And want to give a very brief introduction to her, and then we'll pass it on to her. So Lorna Davis is the global ambassador to the B Corp movement, and she was the former CEO of DanoneWave. She's been doing some amazing work, both at DanoneWave and then also now as the global ambassador. But we'll really leave it at that and dive right on in. So Lorna, thank you for being here. Could you tell us a little bit about whatever you'd like to share in your journey of how you've come to sitting here today?
Yes. Well, I think I'll start with geography because that's probably a smart place to start. I'm originally South African, but I have lived in 7 countries. Almost all of those moves driven by jobs. I've been in commercial life or big multinationals my whole career. And I joined, I think the sort of conscious part of the journey really began when I joined Danone in 1997 as a general manager of the New Zealand business. And then I had various other roles in Danone. And in 2007, I was running the Danone business in China, the Danone biscuit business, when that business was sold to Kraft. And so I went to Kraft and put the 2 businesses together in China, then moved to the US and was the president of Nabisco. And I think the move from China to the US was kind of the moment when I woke up, really, in a way. I think there are a couple of reasons for that. You know, before that, I had just been focused on doing my job the best that I could. I wouldn't have called myself a conscious leader. I think if people would have said, you know, I was a good person and I was reasonably open and I think I had a fair level of compassion, but I was very focused on delivering the numbers. And I really wasn't all that environmentally aware or interested until I got to China. But China, 6 years in China, it's like fast forwarding what we've done on the planet, because you've got now everything that we in the West have had for many years. Suddenly you're talking about 1 billion people who want it like now. Actually it's 1.5 billion, right? Who want it now, and you can understand that. But actually seeing the implications in front of my eyes really woke me up. And then I came to the US, and interestingly, after having lived in all of these other countries and having lived in China, I pretty much thought I could handle anything. And I was sort of smug about moving to the US. I thought, oh, this will be fun. And I found the move to the US the hardest of my career by far, because I had never kind of lived in such hard-edged capitalism, if you like. You know, there's this a real sense of, you know, we've got to deliver numbers, shareholder primacy. And I think the combination of these two things combined, so China followed by the US, combined with, you know, getting older and getting a different perspective on life, I think it kind of brought me to my knees, really. And so I decided that I wasn't going to work in big corporates anymore. I was going to go and join a not-for-profit. So I did all this research, and I was about to sign with a really good not-for-profit. But then I started to think really carefully about this business model, and I tried to understand how I would spend my time. And they said to me, you know, you're going to spend basically half your time in Silicon Valley raising money, and then you're going to spend the other half of your time in Africa doing all these good things. So I thought, that doesn't make any sense. So now hold on, I'm going to raise a whole lot of money from people who don't care, and then I'm going to go to the other side of the world and do some good things. This sort of one-way traffic doesn't make sense. And around about this time, Emmanuel Faber had taken over as the CEO of Danone, and he asked me to come back to Danone and take Danone to the next level of the journey of purpose, because Danone's been on a sort of purpose journey for many years from the beginning. And so they created this fabulous title for me called Chief Manifesto Catalyst, which was actually a cool title, because we had written a manifesto about what we wanted to be in the world, or they had, and the challenge for me was, how was I to bring it to life? And so the word catalyst was demonstrating that. And it's actually, it sort of opened up for me a whole lot of investigation into the language we use in business. And I really don't like military language, which is very common in business. I don't like words like officer. And I think that words like catalyst are really powerful. And in fact, it was fun in that job, because it had so much flexibility and ambiguity that I could make that role one that worked for me, and it really connected me to the whole company in a whole new way, because there are 100,000 people in Danone, and engaging them in the journey was a real privilege to me, because I really got to see how particularly the more junior people in our organization, and particularly the people in faraway countries, Indonesia, China, India, Eastern Europe, were really hungry to be on a different kind of purpose journey. So it was at that time in 2015 that we discovered B Corp and the whole certification process. And we got really excited about it, because we had been doing a whole lot of really good things inside Danone for many years, but we didn't know how good those were. We didn't know how well they would look from the outside. So the idea of an actual audited system from somebody else was really powerful for us. So we decided to experiment and put some of our businesses through the B Corp certification. And what we discovered was, not only is the certification super powerful because it's a really clear set of KPIs that businesses like to go after, and it's very meaningful set of measures, it also requires a legal change to your structure, so that you have to declare that you are responsible to a broader level of stakeholders than just your financial shareholders. And that's a courageous move, but it's a very definite move. And then the third thing is that it joined us into a community, or it brought us into a community of people who we aspire to be like. And so for me, that journey of sort of hard measures, activism, and sort of systems change in the way that you structure yourself legally, combined with being in a world of people that you admire and that you want to be like, is a sort of a magical combination. And so we were on that journey, and then Danone, we bought WhiteWave, which is a big plant-based and organic dairy business in the US. And I came back to the US and as the CEO of that new entity, and created it as a public benefit corporation, and set it off to become a B Corp. And in fact, it became a B Corp on its 1-year anniversary in April this year, and is now the largest B Corp in the world. And I am now on loan from Danone to B Lab, which is the not-for-profit behind the B Corp certification, because I believe so passionately in this model that business as a force for good is the most powerful mechanism. That, you know, not-for-profits have their place, but the mechanism of sort of one-way traffic isn't the answer, and that business is designed to deliver multiple objectives. And if you create the sort of framework for a business to be seeking the right level of impact at a whole number of levels, financial, environmental, social, that the system can get healthier and healthier, and you really do get a virtuous cycle. And so from a level of consciousness point of view, or my own personal consciousness, I find myself every day embedded in a world now of people that are on some journey of awakeness. Some of them very awake, some of them just a little bit awake. But this kind of soup that I swim in right now is a kind of a sort of a self-fulfilling benefit to me. And so I feel like, in a way, my whole life is coming together in a really, kind of a miraculous way, really, being able to build on my business experience, but being able to shift it so that big corporates can really become a force for good. That's my story.
A wonderful story it is indeed. So much richness there. Lorna, maybe what did you find most surprising? It sounds like there were a number of different stages, but in the most recent, when it sounds like coming back as the chief manifesto catalyst, what was most surprising to you along this journey that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have imagined would be where you are right now?
I think this is a subject that I think about a lot, particularly with reference to women in business. And there are many days when I am sad and I judge myself for not having done enough to change the paradigm for women in business. And when I look back on it, that's a huge storm here, as you can tell. There's a big thunderstorm here in New York today. I think all of us are challenged by working within a system and succeeding within it versus changing the system. And I think in my earlier years, I was so surprised that I had kind of got any level of success at all. And I was so sort of grateful, really, for any job that anybody gave me, because I never had high aspirations. And by the way, I have not one business qualification. I have a degree in anthropology and psychology. So I have not one business qualification. So I didn't really question the system. And the scorecard was really clear, the financial scorecard. And so I worked within the paradigm to be the best that I could and to do the best that I could. And it's only been in the last, I guess 5 years, but a little bit more than that, maybe 7 or 8, where it's really sort of occurred to me that I can actually change the system, that I can be part of that. And when I meet youngsters who realize that, virtually from when they were toddlers, that they were committed to changing the world, I kind of am at times embarrassed and times intrigued and at times sort of self-critical, but that's just kind of the way it was, right? So I think if you had said to me that I would be as much of an activist as I am now, if you had said to me that I would be so committed to changing the system as I am now, I don't think I would have believed you. Right? So that's been the sort of biggest surprise to me now. Yeah.
That's such inspiring words, Lorna. And this idea that giving and caring more for the success and benefit of planet and people will bring more than self-interest can, and focus on my own needs. It's such a wonderful shift that I think for me fills me with gratitude and appreciation, which are perhaps the sweetest feelings that I've had in my life. And I was wondering, Lorna, if you had just one story about seeing how this giving, almost really unconditional giving, does create actually the greatest level of achievement and success.
Well, you know, I have so many stories about how wise people are when they approach the world from a different perspective. So I'm going to give you a really good example.
Thank you.
So when we were, because this is about like how this is actually natural for humans. This is not the, you know, this is the default for humans. So when we were closing the deal in North America, and actually I think I've already told the story once, but anyway, I'll tell it again. So when we were closing the deal for DanoneWave and WhiteWave and Danone in North America, I was having, the deal hadn't closed yet. We were waiting for the Department of Justice. And I was having a discussion with the head of procurement. And I said to him, we were going through the normal thing, it was a normal work in progress meeting. And I said to him, and he's a Belgian guy, a Flemish Belgian guy, and he's a thoughtful, committed, interested procurement fellow. And I said to him, look, we've never bought almonds before. We've always, we're good at dairy, we're good at lots of things, but we're buying a huge business in the almond industry. And I'm kind of worried because I don't know too much about almonds, but I know that they use a lot of water and they're grown in California, and California doesn't have enough water. And so when the deal closes, when you go and speak to the procurement guys, can you make sure you ask about water? He goes, sure, and then we move on. The deal closes, and we're having our work in progress meeting, and we get to almonds on the list, and he says, you asked me about the water in California and everything? And I said, yeah. He said, let me tell you, it's not only about the water, it's about the bees. So I say, it's about the bees? What do you mean? So then he explains to me that in a monoculture, the bee death rate can be up to 80%, because in the off season, there's not enough food for the bees. If you have the right kind of crops that are planted between your almonds, you can have a bee death rate of less than 20%. And apparently, depending on the price of bees, sometimes farmers just don't mind if the bees die, they just buy more bees. Sometimes they do mind, and it's a thing. So he says, so I discovered that actually a reasonable bee death rate in a season is 20%. And so I have said that I'm only going to buy almonds from people that can demonstrate to me that the KPI of their bees, that their bee death rate is no more than 25%. And I say, I'm now speechless. This story took a lot longer than the one I'm telling, but so I say, that's unbelievable. How did you find that out? And he says, well, when I went to see the almond guy, I didn't say to him how much of almonds, which is what I would have said once upon a time. I said to him, can you tell me about almonds? So when you actually think about that little story, what you get is a few really interesting things. You get a really powerful business person who, by the way, his boss asks him to ask about water. But he's now in this conscious movement thing. So he doesn't just ask about water. He says, tell me about bees, about almonds, open-ended. And then he listens. And then he works out what all the issues are. And then he takes it to a KPI. And then he uses the power that he has to say, I'm only going to buy if you do the things that I've now decided are right for the planet as a whole. And it was so, in a way, easy for him, because the shape of the conversation had opened up. And so for me, what I'm noticing in this game, and I notice it all the time. I mean, yesterday I was having a conversation with somebody in the UK, and we were doing a sort of review on the whole B Corp journey. And one of the women said, oh, one of the people in one of the companies called me up and said, I have to do a really short packaging run because I've made some changes, but that means I'm going to generate a lot of waste and I don't feel good about that. So what's the kind of B Corp way of thinking about short runs and packaging waste? And these are questions that people just wouldn't have asked before, but they just naturally do. And so, I have come to the conclusion, a couple things. The first is, just as I don't like military metaphors, the metaphor that I'm finding the most helpful today is family. When I ask people in a crowd, how many of you have children? And a very big percentage of people in any crowd have children. And I ask them if parenting is easy, and they go, no. And then I say, is parenting a game of short-term, long-term trade-offs, multiple agendas, multiple stakeholders? Yes. Are you doing that every day? Yes. Well, that's what we're talking about here, and this is all we're talking about. This is a natural human behavior. And then somehow in business, we've said, forget all that, you've only got one goal. That's this one thing. It's like saying, your kid gets born, you say, you're going to be 1.75 meters, you're going to have a degree from this, and you're going to make, $100,000 a year. That's insane. Nobody parents like that. So why would you run a business like that? And so what I notice is that when people start to think like that, they realize, actually, it's not as hard as I thought. Oh, yes, there are trade-offs. Yes, sometimes you make mistakes. Yes, sometimes you have to think long-term and that, you lose in the short term. But that's normal. That's not so hard. So I've found it just joyful. And I found it just joyful seeing people. It actually makes me tearful, seeing people sort of accessing their wisdom, their normal human wisdom, and being allowed to bring it to work, being encouraged to bring it to work, and then seeing how it pays off. It's just like a miracle, right? And I think there's another thing I want to say about this, about leadership. I was talking to another young woman yesterday who's driven the whole journey in North America. She's like the person who actually did the certification. And she said, I think I could quote her email to me. She said, it's been the greatest journey of my life. And she's, I don't know, 35 maybe. And what I notice is that when you need to lead in this world, this conscious sort of broad stakeholder management world, the old model that said that the person at the top knows and the person at the bottom doesn't know is upended. Because just as every time my mobile phone goes wrong, I give it to the youngest person that I can find and ask them to fix it because I don't understand it. The same is true on this journey. And so if you engage the young people in your business, they are inspired and motivated and willing to do the work. And you can chill a bit. So actually, it's easier for senior people. You don't have to work nearly so hard because you don't have to know everything, because you can kind of delegate it to people who are passionate about this journey and who instinctively know how to make a set of trade-offs that we are uncomfortable with because we've had it trained out of us. So that's what but it's hard for people. So, I mean, many of us, we're so attached to knowing, we're so attached to being right. It's hard to say, I don't know, can you fix it? But you get over it.
Thank you, Lorna. That was very powerful. Thank you.
Lorna, what that makes me think of is in some of the work that Valeria and I do, very much creating that space, seeing the wisdom of the teams, the wisdom of the crowd, and really taking away, this title versus this title. And one of the things we explore is interferences, like what do our own individual interferences, the team interferences, get in the way to really experience this powerful group, this community that you have, family, as you so put it? Like, so what are, in your experience, what are the interferences that you've seen show up, maybe even for yourself personally, that you saw the interference, became aware of it, and either were able to work through it for yourself or for your teams?
Oh, it's such a great question. I mean, because it's in a way it's the challenge of my life. I am now at a point where I can almost see my ego taking over, and I can see the magic disappear. So I'll be in a situation where I was at a lunch today with a group of people, and there were times in that conversation where I was talking the B Corp story, and I was open, and I was authentic, and I was connected. And then there were a few times when I was just trying to be a big hero, and I was just trying to be valued and trying to be important. And I could actually feel it cut the room, I could kind of feel it in the air. And of course, I only felt it afterwards. There are sometimes I can feel it before. But what I noticed is the desire to own, the desire to be the one that did it, the desire to have your name on it, is such a human thing. It's a part of our desire to be valued and mastery. It's also the thing that kills so much magic. And so I think there are a couple of things that I'm learning about, or that I've experimented with. The first is, there's nothing more powerful than simply owning it and saying it. Like I've just said it to you now. There's not neither of you and nobody watching this video is going to think that I'm a nasty person because of that. They're going to say, I get it. I'm there too. So the more we can be honest about acknowledging it, the better. The second thing is, you don't need to fix it. What I've noticed is, I don't need to fix it. I just need to notice it. As soon as I noticed it, it sort of fixes itself, which is kind of miraculous. So I think there's that. I also think, though, that there's a really big space for fun and disruption in this place. And I think I'm really not joking about this, but this movement can get very earnest and very, as the British say, very worthy, and it can be kind of dull. People are like so, and it can have its own level of self-importance. So I think it's really important that we keep light. And I've experimented a lot with getting people dressed up. Wigs, hats, boas, funny glasses and stuff for important conversations. Because what happens is people they own their apparent space in the world. I don't know. I'm sure there are people who are really expert at this language, so forgive me, the language isn't good, but they hold themselves in a particular way. They wear a certain set of clothes. They have titles, labels. We are in lanyard hell. We have these things around our necks when we go to conferences and meet with big companies with our name and our title. And we wear this thing. And this thing, the clothes, the hair, the suit, whatever it is, kind of takes over. If you can disrupt that in any way and have people interact in a really authentic way, magic happens. So, for example, at Danone, every year we have a big event which we call Oxygen, where we do it slightly differently every year. They do it, I don't know how they're doing it this year, but I ran one last year where we got about 40 people from around the world, all different levels, and all different areas of expertise. And we were tackling the subject of how we were tackling a particular subject, which is related to this. I won't go into the details of that. And on the opening night, first of all, nobody had name tags or titles. I mean, they had name tags, but no titles, nobody. So we had Emmanuel Faber in the room, who's the CEO of Danone, and we had, 25-year-old from I don't know, the Dominican Republic in the room. And nobody knew who anybody's title was. And we wore wigs and hats and boas on the first day, and we cooked together from food that had been, there was going to be trash, and we cooked for each other. And there was something about the magic of that whole experience that allowed the next day to be content filled and ego diminished, because and it was relatively simple thing to do. I mean, I've done the dressing up thing quite a lot in my life, because it works very well. If you make it too elaborate, it's complicated and it's embarrassing. You need to have things that are easy to put on and take off, and that don't make people feel like idiots, but that add fun and disrupt ego. So I think there are lots of little sort of techniques that you can use. I think that there's a third thing that is interesting to me, that's becoming more interesting to me, that what I notice when I'm speaking to people about the journey, I was talking to a person 2 days ago, very big company that is interested in becoming a B Corp. And he said to me, I don't think they're ever going to become a B Corp because I don't think their business is, has got what it takes. But I'm really impressed that he's on the journey. And I asked him, why are you interested? And he said, because about 3 months ago, my daughter sent me a photograph of a river that had been polluted by some of the products that we make. And she said, I hope you're proud of yourself, Dad. And he said, I want to do it differently. And so what I'm noticing is that when people get in touch with their bigger purpose, their higher, the thing that they're trying to do on the planet, which is often connected back to the family thing. Whenever I do the family comment, people go, oh, yeah. And then you go a little bit further and you say, what is your mission? And there are lots of ways of connecting people to their mission, of course. Once you're in touch with what you're trying to do on the planet, the difficulties are relatively easy to get out of the way. If you've got people who've got a really big, bold mission, small technicalities like my boss doesn't understand, it's just a small technicality. Whereas if you're not in touch with that big vision, then my boss doesn't understand is a stopper. So yeah, I think that's it. Self-awareness, fun, and connection to big picture vision, not necessarily in that order.
Wow. There were multiple times I had goosebumps through sharing of that. Thank you. Just such a simple yet so powerful, and yet not necessarily easy. And it's amazing the way that you expressed it. That all it can take is one little shift that just completely opens up the door for somebody's world.
Yeah, and this is the point. I mean, the thing that's been amazing to me, and it's like, I feel kind of embarrassed. I'm 58. It's like, Jesus, how long did it take me to get this? It's supposed to be easy. I mean, I have here my favorite quote in the world, which you can't read, but it is, when I don't know who I am, I serve you. And when I know who I am you. We are all just walking each other home. It's Ram Dass. I love Ram Dass. And it's true, yeah, that when we feel connected to ourselves and to our humanity, anything's possible. Everything's possible. We're God, for God's sake. That's it. And so all of this other stuff that we stick on top is just decoration. And so when people get that, then everything else is just easy, right? I ran a course, an experimental course about 6 weeks ago with some colleagues in Switzerland, which we called the B Corp Leadership Way. And, it was just completely spontaneous in January. I thought, this takes different kind of leadership. Let's get a bunch of people together and let's talk about how to be leaders. It's very random and kind of fun. And so the woman who was kind of leading it had this great framework, which was from me to we to the world. And it looked very, it looked fancy on the brochure and all that. From me to we to the world, good. So then a couple of weeks before, somebody said, we better call the participants and find out like what's on their mind, so that we can make sure that we do this course well. So they got called, and there were about 16 participants, and they're all senior, running business units in big companies, running multi-million-dollar businesses. And they, almost all of their concerns were about we. Their concerns were about, my boss, my colleagues, my subordinates, the structure of my business unit. And a lot of it was, I'm going to call it complaints, like I get it, but my boss doesn't get it, I get it, but I'm just struggling. These millennials are difficult, whatever people say. So that's cool. We understood that. And then they came to the course. And once we got in touch with the world, like what their purpose was, and we had a whole series of personal resilience exercises, meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, eating, healthy food and stuff like that. Once people got in touch with my mission in the world, the question becomes, if I want to, transform, I've written mine, which I don't remember, but anyway, let's assume that I want to stop rhino poaching, which is another one of my visions here. If I want to stop rhino poaching, who am I to be? Who am I to be in the realization of that vision? That's the only question. My big picture vision, stop rhino poaching, and who am I to be? How grounded am I to be? How much of an activist am I to be? How am I going to show up in that? The details of the we fall away. They become much less important. They're just a strategy. They're just stuff you have to do to get that thing done. And so somehow, that seems to be a kind of a natural thing that happens to people. They go out to the world and then they come back to who they have to be. And the sort of organizational entity that they're working in simply becomes a strategic, tactical, operational thing that needs to work to get that done. And so I think if we could just get everybody clear that it's the default of the human condition to operate like this, everybody would be much happier and a lot of really great stuff would happen.
I can definitely see that when I connect purpose and what I need to do to manifest that purpose, righteousness declines. I can't really get in touch with my righteousness. And the other antidote is compassion. I find it very difficult to be compassionate about my ego and my righteousness. But when I can muster some compassion for it, because it comes from fear, then it loses its grip. And what you said earlier was so powerful, that just by being aware, particularly if that awareness is non-judgmental, it's just awareness, things fall into place. I've definitely experienced that as well in my life. So, Lorna, thank you. This was so inspiring and so appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to express where I am on the journey and what I've discovered and what I'm discovering. And I'm really happy that you are in the world helping the rest of us to become more conscious.
Well, we're grateful, we're very honored to be all in this community together, as you said, as part of the same family.
It's extraordinarily inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lorna, as we're wrapping up here, you've shared some really amazing experiences and insights. Maybe just as some lasting thoughts, what would you like to share to the community, conscious leaders, conscious teams, the world at large, what would you like to leave us with?
So I'd like to say a couple of things. The first is, if you do nothing else in your life, if you make no other change, just spend 20 minutes every day in silence. You can call it prayer, you can call it meditation, you can call it anything you want. Just at a personal level, if every individual was quiet for 20 minutes, things change. So that's kind of my big aha. That's the first thing. And the second thing, I think, is the most important decision that you make is the company that you keep. And choose your friends, your colleagues, your peers first. Choose them wisely, because you will become like them. And so I think that the B Corp community for me has been extremely powerful, because it's created a peer set for us that holds us to account and challenges us, and that we admire. And there is a lot of research that says that you become like the people you hang out with. And so I think that that's a simple but important way of deciding who you want to be and who you want your business to be. So those are the things that come to me right now.
And very much taken to heart.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lorna.
Thank you.
Conscious leaders, conscious teams, thanks for joining us today. My co-host, Valerio Pascotto, and our special guest, Lorna Davis. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and all the wonderful work you're doing. If people wanted to learn more about either you or the work you're doing, where could they go?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I accept pretty much anybody who wants to be my friend on LinkedIn, or they can send me an email to ldavis@bcorporation.net.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you,
Valerio. Have a fantastic rest of your day, everyone, and we'll be continuing this conversation shortly. Cheers, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We have many more exciting thought leaders to come on this show. If you enjoyed this interview, please click the like button and also subscribe so that you can stay tuned to learn from other powerful thought leaders in future shows. We would also appreciate your comments and feedback on the show, as well as who else you would like to hear from. And don't forget to visit our site, IGEOS.net, to download the free worksheet on the 5 disciplines of a high-performance team. See you next time.